Decades after the camera stopped rolling, Marla Gibbs and Hal Williams still called each other by their character names. Mary, Lester, not out of habit, not as some cute leftover bit because that TV marriage had turned into a real 5-decade friendship that never actually ended when the show did. Just a couple of weeks before he passed away, they were on the phone together, laughing, catching up, calling each other Mary and Lester one more time. Neither of them knew it would be the last time. On July 15th, 2026, Hal Williams died peacefully at his home in Rancho Mirage, California, at the age of 91, and the tribute that followed from his longtime co-star and friend, 95-year-old Marla Gibbs, is one of the most genuinely moving things to come out of classic television in a long time. Today, I'm walking through that tribute, the real story behind how Hal Williams even got cast in the first place, and why so many people in the industry are calling him one of the most quietly influential actors of his generation. Her emotional statement, Marla Gibbs made a point of clarifying something a lot of fans probably didn't know. Her connection with Hal Williams didn't actually begin on the set of 227. Their journey together started long before either of them ever stepped onto that NBC studio soundstage. That detail matters because it reframes everything else about their on-screen partnership. When Gibbs and Williams eventually did share the screen as Mary and Lester Jenkins, they weren't two actors meeting for the first time and building chemistry from scratch. They were already connected, already comfortable with each other, before the cameras ever captured a single scene of their television marriage. Here's a piece of television history that's genuinely important, and it comes straight from Gibbs herself. 227 was being adapted for television back in the 1980s. Gibbs actively fought the network to make sure her character, Mary Jenkins, had a husband on the show at all. Think about what that fight actually represents. It would have been easy, and honestly common for the era, for network executives to build a sitcom around a single mother or an unmarried lead character, particularly for a black family sitcom in that period. Gibbs pushed back against that instinct, insisting that Mary Jenkins have a husband, a complete, intact family unit at the center of the show. Once that fight was won, casting Hal Williams to play that husband turned out to be, in Gibbs' own words, one of the best decisions of her entire career. That's a significant thing to say about a casting choice coming from someone who's had an extensive career of her own. It tells you just how much Williams brought to that role and how much his presence shaped the show's identity from the very beginning. Once Williams was cast, what he and Gibbs built together, alongside a young Regina King playing their daughter Brenda, became something genuinely significant in television history. In 5 seasons, Gibbs and Williams formed a foundational television family, one that proudly showcased the love, strength, and stability of a black household to millions of viewers across the country. An industry and era where those kinds of stable, loving black family portrayals weren't nearly as common on network television as they should have been, 227 offered exactly that, week after week, built on the real chemistry between Gibbs and Williams. That's the kind of cultural impact that doesn't always get measured in awards or ratings alone. It gets measured in how many households saw a version of a family that reflected their own experience, portrayed with warmth, humor, and genuine stability, at a time when that representation mattered enormously. This is really the emotional heart of Gibbs' tribute, and it's what makes his story land so differently than a typical Hollywood remembrance. 227 ended back in 1990. That's 36 years before Hal Williams passed away. And according to Gibbs, despite all that time, despite the show being long over, she and Williams never stopped calling each other Mary and Lester during their private conversations. That's not nostalgia. That's not two former co-stars occasionally reminiscing about an old job. That's a genuine, sustained friendship that used those old character names as a kind of private shorthand, a term of endearment built out of decades of real closeness that had nothing to do with maintaining a public image or promoting anything. And it turns out that friendship stayed active right up until the very end. Gibbs shared that they had spoken on the phone just a couple of weeks before his passing. An ordinary catch-up call filled with laughing and conversation, the kind of call two old friends have without any sense that it might be significant. Gibbs has said she never could have imagined that call would end up being their final conversation. There's something genuinely powerful about that detail. It wasn't a dramatic, tearful final goodbye. It was just two old friends being exactly who they'd always been with each other, laughing, catching up, calling each other Mary and Lester one more time, with no idea it was the last chance they'd get to do that. Gibbs also specifically remembered that Williams checked in on her right up until his very final days, not the other way around. Even as his own health was clearly declining, he was still the one reaching out, still the one making sure his old friend was doing okay. Beyond their personal friendship, Gibbs made a point of highlighting a side of Hal Williams that had nothing to do with acting at all. his genuine selflessness within his community. She specifically remembered how he would quietly go out of his way to help young artists, including securing donated theater seats and personally organizing seating charts, purely out of kindness. That's a strikingly specific, unglamorous detail to include in a tribute, not a big philanthropic gesture designed for headlines, but a genuinely quiet, behind-the-scenes kind of generosity. The sort of thing someone does because they actually care, not because anyone's watching. That detail tells you a lot about who Hal Williams was as a person, separate from his considerable television legacy. Someone spending time organizing seating charts to help young artists get access to theater seats isn't chasing recognition. That's just quietly showing up to help, again and again, in ways most people never hear about. While 227 is likely the role most fans associate with Hal Williams, his career actually spanned roughly 6 decades in television, and he was also widely celebrated for playing Officer Smitty Smith on Sanford and Son, another hugely significant show in the history of black representation on American television. That's an extraordinary career arc. 2 genuinely iconic roles, decades apart, both contributing meaningfully to how black families and black characters were portrayed on national television during pivotal eras. Very few actors get to be part of one show that shifts cultural representation in a meaningful way. Williams was part of 2. Gibbs wasn't the only 227 co-star who stepped forward with a deeply personal tribute following Williams' passing. Regina King, who played their on-screen daughter Brenda, and has since become one of the most respected actresses and directors in the industry, shared her own emotional message, expressing profound gratitude for her TV dad. King specifically credited Williams with shielding her from industry politics during her early years as a young actress, creating a safe, loving environment on set that felt genuinely like home to her at a formative moment in her career and life. That's a significant thing for King to say, given everything she's gone on to accomplish in the decades since. To have someone she worked with as a young actress specifically remembered for protecting her from the harsher, more political realities of the entertainment industry speaks to the kind of person Williams was on set, not just performing warmth in front of the camera, but actually extending real care and protection to a young colleague behind it. Jack A. Harry, another prominent voice from that era of television, also paid tribute to Williams, describing him as a true gentleman who consistently advocated for compassionate, present, and loving portrayals of black fathers on television. Description that effectively changed the landscape of American sitcoms during that period. That's a meaningful, specific kind of legacy, not just playing a good father on screen, but actively pushing for that kind of representation to exist at all, at a time when it wasn't guaranteed. Hal Williams spent 6 decades building a television legacy that helped reshape how black families were represented on American screens. But based on everything Marla Gibbs and his former co-stars have shared since his passing, his most lasting legacy might actually be a much smaller, quieter one. Friendship that outlasted a television show by 36 years, a phone call 2 weeks before the end filled with laughter instead of goodbyes, and a habit of quietly showing up for other people, on set and off, without ever needing anyone to notice. Mary and Lester, one last time. Rest in peace, Hal Williams, 1934 to 2026. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. I'm covering more of these real, heartfelt stories behind the legends of television and film every week. See you in the next one.